welcome back to another video. Today's video is part 2 in our exercise series, and today we're going to be talking about exercise intolerance and fibromyalgia and how common it is and all of the reasons that make it harder for us to exercise, basically. So before we begin exercising, it's important to understand the biological aspects of what is happening when we, fibromyalgia patients, engage in strenuous physical activity or exercise. Our pain is now widely thought to be related to dysfunctional central pain processing, including central sensitization and inadequate pain inhibition. I would just like to make a little note here as to what is central sensitization. Central sensitization is a condition of the central nervous system and very common symptom of fibromyalgia that is associated with the development and maintenance of chronic pain. When central sensitization occurs, the nervous system goes through a process called wind-up and gets regulated in a persistent state of high reactivity. This persistent or regulated state of high reactivity lowers the threshold of what causes pain and subsequently comes to maintain pain even after the initial injury or cause for pain is gone. It has been found that we are sensitive to normal, painful, and repetitive painful stimuli, which obviously has implications for the way that we respond to physical activity. However, if you ask any doctor, they will tell you that the best way to treat fibromyalgia is through exercise. Although research consistently shows the benefits of aerobic exercise, most people with fibromyalgia still don't exercise. Estimates show that 4 in 5 patients don't do any kind of exercise, and the most common reason as to why not is an increase in soreness. And that's what this series is about. It's about getting us to move in a safe and sustainable way. Unfortunately, most of the time we only realize that we did overexertion or pushed ourselves too hard when the pain and fatigue and flares hit. So it'd be important to note some of the early signs of activity intolerance so we can stop and rest. So the first sign is dizziness or lightheadedness during or after exercise. Another one is extreme shortness of breath during or after exercise. However, some shortness of breath is common during and after exercise. By this I mean if it's extreme, if it's too intense, and if it lasts for a very long time. Extremes of persistent fatigue not relieved by rest. Change in the rhythm of your pulse, so skipping beats, pauses, racing pulse, and sudden and unusually low pulse. However, a moderate increase in your heart rate is a totally normal response to exercise and it's perfectly healthy. High levels of joint, bone, or muscle pain. And lastly, nausea, vomiting, cool and clammy sweats, or a feeling of weakness. So at any of these signs, it would be prudent to stop and rest. And if you feel better, then you can start again. And if you don't, you will need to rest until you do. And it's important that when you take up exercise again, be it in 5 minutes time or next week, that you try and do it at a lower intensity than what you were doing on that day that caused you to have one of these symptoms or reactions. So why is it that we tend to have exercise intolerance? If we know that exercise is helpful and we still don't do it, what's the problem? It's definitely not because we don't want to get better. It's more likely that exercise is just more difficult when you have fibromyalgia, and it could be for several different reasons. What I have found is there are lots of small reasons as to why exercise would be particularly difficult for us, which when combined would explain perfectly well why we have such a hard time exercising. It's especially useful to understand them as exercise is such an important part of our treatment and in controlling our symptoms. One reason given for our exercise intolerance is that we simply don't have the energy to condition like other people who can handle the increase in exercise required to condition. So this means that we have a hard time increasing our level of fitness. Instead, if the exercises uses more than the limited amount of energy that our body can produce, our systems crash and we feel like we were hit by a truck for the next few days, if not weeks. They then suggest that because of this, the key is finding an amount of low intensity exercise we can do where we feel good tired. Then, instead of ramping up the length or intensity of our workouts, we stick to the same amount and work on increasing our energy production. Another reason given is related to blood flow to the muscles. During exercise, blood flow to the muscles increases to bring important nutrients and remove waste from the tissues. If waste such as lactic acid builds up in the muscles, anyone can develop exercise-related pain. However, blood flow to the muscles during exercise is lower than normal in people with fibromyalgia, making exercise more painful. Another reason may be related to the production of endorphins. Normally, exercise reduces pain by increasing pain-blocking brain chemicals such as endorphins. We talked about this in my last video. However, the pain-blocking pathways in our brains are less active and less responsive, which would also explain why exercise is more painful for us. On top of that, people with fibromyalgia often have abnormalities in the autonomic nervous system, which controls heart rate and blood pressure, and this could be contributing to the levels of fatigue that we feel after exercise. And there may also be hormonal factors playing a role. There is a growth hormone that helps repair the tiny muscle tears called muscle microtrauma that occur during exercise. Fibromyalgia is associated with deficiencies in this growth hormone, and this may impair our repair mechanisms, making it harder for our muscles to heal. The fact that this mechanism doesn't work very well for us may mean that muscles, along with other peripheral tissues, may initiate and maintain central sensitization, which we saw earlier is the underlying mechanism of chronic pain. A study found that the dysfunction concerning this growth hormone regulation in response to exhaustive exercise correlates with increased pain scores, number of tender points, myalgic scores, and pre-exercise inflammatory cytokine levels. Cytokines are a broad and loose category of small proteins that are important in cell signaling. So the increase in cytokine levels ultimately elevate cortisol levels, possibly producing symptoms similar to those seen in sickness, which are widespread pain, stiffness, fatigue, sleep disturbance, depression, and exercise intolerance. So in spite of all of this information explaining why we are so sensitive to exercise, the myth around fibromyalgia and exercise is still very much around. And it is supported by numerous studies showing that exercise lowers our pain levels and gives us more energy. So it's actually not a myth. The problem here is that doctors glance at the title of these medical studies and go on to tell their patients to hit the gym and exercise. What they're missing is that the amount and type of exercise we need is very different from what most people would even consider exercise, and that the process of increasing our fitness and energy levels via exercise is long, slow, and will have a lot of bumps on the way. If we exert ourselves to the point of exhaustion, we're probably going to trigger a flare that lands us on the couch for days or weeks or months, and we won't want to exercise again. We all have different levels of fitness, so the exact amount of exertion we can handle will vary from person to person. A slow, steady pace is what we need. We need to move enough to avoid becoming sedentary and keep our muscles from atrophying, but not so much that we cause a flare. This gray area is what we need to find and what we've been missing. I'll be going into more depth about this in future videos on this series. For me, the biggest takeaway from this is that we are exercising all wrong, and our doctors aren't explaining it to us properly. We shouldn't be exercising like normal people are exercising. We shouldn't be doing the activities that they are, and we shouldn't be trying to compare ourselves to them. Obviously, in a few years, if you work on your fitness levels, you may be more fit than a regular person, but that means that it took you a long time to work up to that. You didn't just wake up one day and, in a few weeks became fit. Our bodies simply can't handle the amount of exercise needed to become fit and very active in a short period of time. So whenever we are thinking about exercising and becoming more fit, we can never have a small window of time to accomplish that in. I think the problem for a lot of us is that we try to exercise like regular people, which then causes flares and makes us feel awful about exercise and ourselves. We create an aversion to exercise, which then creates an intolerance because our bodies are just not used to moving anymore. So that is everything for today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave it a like, a comment, and consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Also consider becoming a member on Patreon because you get early access to all of my content, and in some tiers you get access to exclusive videos made just for you. Also, you would be supporting me and helping the channel grow and helping me make more videos. So that is all of the things that I have to say. I'm gonna go now before the light starts hitting my face, which it already is. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!